Captain Ray Markham, the artificial bait expert. He is also a writer for the Tampa Tribune. If you read the paper today, you saw Ray's article. If you read it tomorrow, you'll see my article. He also writes on the West Central for Florida Sportsman Magazine.
And a bunch of Action Spotter.
And he's a professional tackle consultant. He works with a lot of lure companies and one of the best artificial bait guys that I know. And I'm sure he'll give you some tips that you can use. Captain Ray.
Thank you, Bill. Wow. There's been a whole lot of stuff going on today that we got to digest, but I wore this shirt just to try and keep you awake. Either that or I can get out in direct traffic later on. People are wondering, it's like they always ask me about color, and we'll get into color, but this is one of my favorite colors for fishing lures. And I will show you something. This bait right here, it glows in the dark, but it doesn't look like this color. But if you put this in the darkness, it glows this color, okay? And there's a reason I like this color. I can also choose this color, which is chartreuse. This is chartreuse and pearl. They call it key lime pie. But this color in the daylight is this color. But in the darkness, this is not really much of a color. But this is this color in the darkness. Okay, the deeper a bait goes in the water, the less amount of light penetrates through the surface down into the water. The light refracts. And because of that, you'll have less light down below. So this bait, which looks like a natural colored belly of a bait fish, as it gets deeper and deeper, it changes to or appears to change to this color, okay? Enough about color, I don't confuse the issue yet, because color's not the major thing here. Before I get away from that thing that Bill was just rigging, that little kind of a flapping tail that Mark Nichols makes, the DOA lure, if I'm fishing that bait for flounder, which I love the flounder fish, now, a lot of people seem to like to eat flounder because they're really tasty, I will rig it so that the tail is flat, just like Bill was rigging it. But if I'm fishing for other fish, I'll rig it so it's like this. Because if you take that bait and rig it so that the tail is vertical like this, when you start twitching the rod, that bait will dart from right to left. If you rig it so that the tail is flat, when you twitch your rod, the bait will hop and go in a straight line. Flounder kind of lie like this with a mouth that goes like that. If that bait keeps going like this, it's difficult for that fish to track that bait and get a hold of it and eat it. I want to make it easy for the fish to eat, okay? So I'll rig it flat, I'll let it hop or just drag it, and the fish can eat it a lot easier. So you don't waste the fish's time by chasing the lure around, just let them eat it, okay? So that's all I need to say on that particular bait. But I have, okay, I'm in the process of moving out of the house that I've been renting for about 20 years down in Terracea. And it's like, somebody said, you don't use a cast net? Well, okay, I found a cast net that I bought about 15 or 20 years ago. It's a mullet net, because I do like a little smoked mullet now and then, fried mullet. And I'm going like, I knew I had a mullet net somewhere out there on this stratigraphic layers of lures and rods and reels and stuff, but I found my mullet net. And it was in another 5-gallon bucket. I pulled the other 5-gallon bucket up, and here I had 2 bait nets in there. And they're like, geez, how long has it been? Well, anyway, the bottom line is that if you don't know what's swimming out there, then it's going to be a little more difficult for you to try and imitate what the fish are eating. So I used to throw a bait net not so much to catch bait to fish with, but just to see what's out there. So don't throw your bait net away just yet. All right, if you want to go out and see what the fish are eating, go out and cast, pull them in, see what you got. Or an even easier way, if you're out fishing with live bait or whatever, always dissect your fish. Always look at the stomach contents and see what fish are eating. Sometimes fish will eat filefish. If there are, it looks like a little skinny thing, kind of like a seahorse family, I think. But there's all kinds of things that fish are eating. Somebody talked about pompano. I think that was Captain Van that was just up here was talking about pompano. One of my favorite fish in the world to eat, but not too many people are aware of this particular bait, this lure called Mr. Pompano. I believe this is a company out of the Carolinas that manufactures this bait. But this is a sand flea, mole crab some people call them. Little imitation. It comes in just one size with this company, but Berkeley also makes some of their gulp baits in a sand flea type of thing with 2 or 3 different sizes, because different areas of the U.S. have different sizes of sand fleas, or possibly even different over on the East Coast than they are here on the West Coast, Florida. But it's a good bait, a good lure, and I'm sitting here trying to go along and pick out stuff that's in here, and I pulled out so much stuff that over the course of time that I have used that work really well, that I'm sitting here going like, yeah, this is the one I want to show them, but now you know what I'm having a problem with moving. Yes?
That sand flea, do you hook it where the hook's just coming out the top, I guess?
Yeah, how you rigging them?
How you rig that sand flea?
Oh, the sand flea? The only way you're going to fish this is either drifting it or on the bottom, okay? A real easy way to do it is just get a live bait hook it, and then just take a little split shot and run it up the line maybe about 1 foot, okay? Cast it out, let it sink to the bottom. Good area to fish. I don't know if I really should say this, but one of the best areas to fish is Paso Grill Channel. Okay, it's excellent. All that area out there around Shell Key. These things just crawl around the edges. A neat thing for you to do is walk the shoreline. If you see coquinas and if you see sand fleas running in and out of the surf, then you want to fish a bait like this. They come in various colors. They have orange, they have pink, they have every color in a rainbow. But pay attention to the color sometimes, because for instance, if you're noticing that these things are starting to get in the spawning scenario, they'll have like a little orange egg sac on them. I know guys that'll fish different kinds of pompano jigs, and they'll go buy these pearlescent beads from a craft store that might be orange, they might be pink, they might be purple or green or blue. They're doing this because pompano sometimes are keying in on the coquinas, okay? And they want to look and see what kind of color coquinas there are, and they'll put a bead just above their little pompano jig. The Bomber company owns the Nylure jigs that I like to use also. One of my all-time favorites is a Doc's Goofy jig. They have another brand that looks similar to it here, the Silly Willy jig, but the Doc's Goofy jig is probably one of my all favorites for pompano. Did I see a hand somewhere a second ago? Okay, I'll keep going. Couple things that people touched on that are really important. I do believe this offshore hotspot, inshore thing is one of the Florida Sportsman fishing charts. If you take a look at the Tampa Bay fishing chart that Florida Sportsman puts out, you'll see something in here that gives me credit for marking this chart that says snook and trout and redfish and pompano, kingfish, cobia, etc. Okay, I want you to understand something. This was done years ago, and just like every chart that you see in here, this is what the bay used to look like, because none of these things are up to date. If it's been out more than a year, it's not current. I like to say to people, when you get this, use it kind of as a thumbnail sketch. It's a guide. This does not mean that because I caught snook here 10 years ago, that there's still going to be snook here. Because every year when we have storms, the bar that's here is going to shift over to there. the trough or the channel that ran around this area over here might disappear. It might move somewhere else. You go to Longboat Pass or New Pass, and that pass that was all dredged out last year that they spent $10 million on, suddenly instead of going out this way, now it goes the way God wanted it to go, this way. All right? So use this stuff with a kind of a grain of salt, but understand something is that it's just a guide, okay? However, to me, if I'm planning a fishing trip, this is my Bible for planning. This is where I begin, okay? Everybody asks me, well, what's your game plan? They usually ask me that a week in advance when I talk to them. And I says, well, I'll let you know the morning that we're getting ready to go. And it's like, well, these are the predicted tides. And I know Bill's probably going to go, well, give us some spots, okay? Spots are where fish were or where fish are going to be. But it's not necessarily here today, all day. It might be at a certain time of the tide, okay? These are predicted tides and tide levels, and this is what you plan by. Okay, they're saying that, okay, the actual levels of these tides should be this if all variables are constant. Okay, and here's where you start running into difficulty with those constants and the variables. The variables can be wind direction, wind velocity, barometric pressure, all of those kinds of things. Now, barometric pressure, how can that fluctuate the level of the tide, the tide level up or down? If you have high pressure, it's pushing down. Okay, or am I going the other way? The other way. High pressure allows well, no, it pushes it down. I was right. Okay, low pressure, think of hurricanes and things. When you have extreme low pressure with hurricanes and that kind of scenario, you have extremely low tides. Think of cold fronts. When we have cold fronts blowing in here in the wintertime, when that wind starts howling out of the south, it blows water up into the bay just before that front arrives, and it pushes water up. So the levels that we're sitting here looking that should be, it could be a foot higher than what the prediction is. So that's going to totally change your game plan from what you thought about a week ago or a month ago when you planned the trip. So the place that you want to fish, you may not be fishing at that same time because the fish are going to be at an area at a certain time of the tide level, okay? So if that's all changed, then you got to rethink your game plan and go with what you see every single day. So as far as planning, I don't know how that has to do with using artificial baits, but it does. Because if I'm fishing, for instance, like redfish, I want to fish redfish as they're moving up on a flat or moving up towards a mangrove island, a swash channel, an oyster bar, something like that. When and where fish are depend, that can control sometimes what they're feeding on. If I go out on these negative low tides and walk a flat in ankle deep water that might be this deep when the tide comes in, what I want to watch for are signs of what other things are feeding on. For instance, if I look and I see a flat and there's a whole flock of like rosette spoonbills sitting around, in ankle deep water to them, feeding. I know rosette spoonbills don't get the color they are because they eat bait fish. They get the color they are because of the iodine that's in crustaceans that they eat. Okay, the darker the pink color, the more iodine in the baits that they're eating. So they're eating crabs and they're eating shrimp. And what do redfish like? Crabs and shrimp. So I want to go out there. I want to look and see what birds are out on the flat. So if I know those birds are feeding there now, when that tide comes in, chances are pretty good that those redfish are going to move to that area. So if they're eating crabs and shrimp, do I want to throw a bait fish? Not necessarily. I may want to, find something like a shrimp and throw a shrimp. Okay, so now, this is how this crazy mind works. This is a DOA shrimp. It's a 1/4 ounce shrimp. I have it rigged 2 or 3 different ways out in the car. I was going to drag all that stuff in and just bore you to death with that, but basically you can fish it right out of the package and catch fish just the way Mark Nichols intended it to. I have not found a better artificial shrimp than this bait. I continue to look, I continue to mess with what he has and make it better, but it just works the way it is. You can fish this bait on a jig head by just simply removing this. Actually, I like some of the just plain little jig heads that he has. It's a shorter shank jig. Got a couple of them here, but it's this particular one here. It's a fairly wide gap, black nickel hook, and it's extremely sharp and it's strong. It doesn't really bend out very easily. Excuse me. And back to color. I started to mention like these colors being kind of outstanding. The reason I choose to use this color or the glow color it is because of how many people fish at night? Now you're going like, well, why do I think of color when I'm thinking of fishing at night, all right? If you fish at night, anybody cast net mullet? Yeah, I'm sure there are a few of you. Have you ever seen when a fish takes off, sometimes it looks like a little phosphorus trail or something like that in the water? Okay, there's little tiny microorganisms in the water. They're bioluminescent, okay? And it's almost like those psyllium sticks, I think that's how you pronounce it. Those things that a lot of times even around Halloween they give them to kids anymore when they're out trick-or-treating, running from door to door. You break these sticks, shake up the chemicals that are in it, and it glows. It glows this color, okay? Now I'm starting to, I don't know if this is really making sense to me, but I'm trying to get there. Okay, now this color is the color that these little bioorganisms glow. And they feed on protein. And they feed on protein in blood. Okay, now let's take this happy little dolphin that runs in on the flats and whacks up a bunch of mullet and pinfish and everything else. Some of them escape. And suddenly I'm realizing that these little bioorganisms that will attach to the wounds or sores on bait fish and shrimp and crabs and all these other things that are out there that predators feed on. Now, this little happy organism that was so happy he didn't get eaten is swimming around with this giant neon sign glowing on it that's like, I'm wounded. Okay, now you got this big slob pig of a snook that Scotty fishes for, that likes to hang and eat dead bait around the Skyway or wherever. And it's eating this dead and wounded stuff because it's easy to eat. Okay, now you got a mindset of predators. Predators don't get big, fat, and happy by being stupid. They get that way by being lazy. Okay, they don't like to chase that young, punky little bait fish that's hauling buggy through the thing. They want that thing that's maybe young and fresh, but got whacked and only is missing a fin or something. And it's like that one-armed man rowing in circles around the boat in a rowboat out in the lake, you know? Well, okay, it's that little bait fish that's cruising away but just can't quite get up ahead of steam to be able to escape. All right, now you've got this small little bait fish that has this little neon glowing thing on it that's going like, eat me, eat me. Because I believe that fish become conditioned to eating what's easy. It's just like the Pavlov salivating dog things. If you went to school and managed to stay awake that day in psychology class, and you know, when the guy was doing this experiment, had all these dogs penned up, rang a bell, dropped food down, dogs would eat the food. Okay? He would continue doing this experiment by constantly ringing the bell and dropping the food. The food was a reward. But after a while, he would ring the bell and not drop the food, but he'd notice that suddenly when the bell rang, the dogs would salivate. They would almost start foaming at the mouth because the bell was the anticipation of the food. Now, I'm telling you that the glow is the anticipation of the food. Okay, the predators are seeing the color and they're anticipating an easy meal. All right, and I'm not saying that I don't have every color in the rainbow aboard my boat, because you and you and you and you each have a favorite color. You like root beer, you like pink, you like green, you like whatever, you know. And honestly, when I get aboard my boat, I do have a lot of different colors, and I'll take some of each and shove it in my pocket. When a fish comes up and bites off a soft plastic lure, I'm going to pull another one out and I'm going to put it on the hook. Doesn't necessarily matter what it is. It's sometimes more for experimentation, and sometimes it's as much to make a point. The point being is that fish are not necessarily always keyed in on color, but they are keyed in on sometimes size or action of a lure. Okay? This has very little action. If you go into a bait shop somewhere and watch the shrimp that are swimming in the tank, typically you're going to see them either sitting on the bottom doing absolutely nothing, being like the lazy thing that big fish want to eat, or they're just kind of like dog paddling around, just kind of and barely moving. Or if you got little Junior with you who loves to play in the bait tanks like Van has in his back of his boat, they'll go in there and they'll be tapping on the tank, and all of a sudden it's freaking out these shrimp and they're jumping out of the water. So, but anyhow, they look normal, natural, doing absolutely nothing, and that's why everything eats a shrimp, okay? Because it's easy. You don't want to make it difficult for these fish.
How are you working these jigs and things, or this fake bait? How do you work them?
Which one again?
Any of them, like the shrimp.
The shrimp. Depends. Okay. It depends on the scenario. If I'm fishing a strong current, let's say I'm fishing boat docks in current. You want to run down, let's say, to Snook Alley, I don't know, down in Venice. Okay, you hear a lot about it because it's kind of a popular nighttime place to fish. A lot of docks that are lighted, and they have a lot of snook that are held in there. It's fairly deep water, pretty swift current. This particular bait, what I'll do is I'll cast it up current and let it sweep with the current. And somebody made a point about holding rod, maybe it's you, Bill, about holding that rod tip up a little bit. I don't want to point the rod anywhere towards the direction of the lure, because number one, I want to make sure I'm using a braided line with this bait. The take on this bait is a lot of times so very subtle that you sometimes don't feel it. That's even more the case in wintertime when fish are somewhat lethargic anyway. But a snook, a trout, a redfish, a lot of times they'll just flare their gills, open their mouth, and suck the bait in. If they decide they don't like it, they blow it out. But in that split second of time, when they do take it in their mouth, if you have your rod tip up like this and you're fishing with a braided line that doesn't stretch, the amount of tension that fish may turn on that bait with may be just enough to set the hook all by itself. If you have the rod pointing at your lure, it does not set the hook. What you want to allow the actual rod tip to do the work for you, because in a sense, when that fish hits your lure, it's loading the rod. And it's like Scotty mentioned earlier this morning, a lot of people are using these really fast taper rods. This is a Stellar Light. Love the rod. It's inexpensive. It's only about 115, 120 bucks, something like that. Terrific warranty. You break it, you bring it back, you got a new one. All right. But it's extremely light. I fish light rods and light tackle because I'm fishing all day long and I may be making 500 to 1,000 casts. If you're fishing artificial bait versus live bait you may make 100 casts. Yeah, on a really good day, 100, 150 casts. If you're fishing like Scotty Moore told you this morning and fishing your live bait like artificials, you'll make more casts than that. But you're not going to sit there and drown baits. You're going to cast and cast and cast. I got a lot of people that try to switch over from live bait to artificials and they want to book an all-day trip. And well, unless you're used to casting that much, I really recommend that you only do 4 or 6 hours to start. Okay, because it takes a little getting used to. But anyway, getting back to how I'm working that, I'm going to hold that rod tip up. When that fish hits this bait, you'll see the rod tip just bump like that. And at the slightest touch of anything, I'm setting the hook, because that's usually what the actual take feels like. This particular color here, by the way, has been absolutely killer on redfish lately. The straight glow is a color that I use most of the time. There are a couple other colors that I really like. This golden glow has been my go-to color now for over about 1.5 years. The original straight glow has been my favorite to this point. The toughest color that he makes is this particular color right here, okay? And this is the Arkansas glow. In other words, it's the 406. Not to confuse you or make it sound like MirrorLure, but for some areas of the bay, the colors do make a difference. I fish in really clear water most of the time. Out of the lower end of Tampa Bay, I fish, I would say pretty much from Sarasota Bay on up to about mid-bay, and then cross over to St. Pete. I'm originally from St. Pete, so I fished all of St. Pete and everything down to Charlotte Harbor and up to Crystal River for the most part. Understand when you're fishing with lures that you're going to fish the water column, and depending on the depth that you fished will determine the kind of lure that you use. You don't want to use a topwater lure if you're fishing for trout in wintertime in 10 feet of water. All right? It ain't gonna work because they're down on the bottom. So you're gonna fish whatever gets to the bottom. Now, with a jig, depending on the angle that you hold your rod and how fast you reel and the diameter of your line and the actual kind of line that you use, it's gonna determine how deep your lure will run. I can take a 1/4 ounce jig, which is what I use. It's my standard size, and I'll take one of these Cal shads and rig it on that, and I'll fish it in anything from 6 inches of water to about maybe 16 feet of water. And the speed of my retrieve, the diameter of the line that you're fishing, and you know, the direction of the current will all make a difference of how deep that lure is going to get. Yes.
You do a lot of sight casting in real shallow water.
I do. When the opportunity presents itself, sure, absolutely. It's a blast.
The fish that you can see.
I target fish. No matter what fishing I fish, whether it's in clear water or not, I target the species of fish that I intend to catch. Okay, because trout live in certain areas, snook live in certain areas, redfish live in certain areas, flounder live in certain areas, and every one of them has a preference as to where they'll be in. But there are times when you can fish in one area and catch maybe 6 species of fish. Okay, but how you fish for those fish sometimes makes a difference on whether you're going to catch them or not.
Do you use scent at all?
Do I use what?
Scent them?
Scents, that's a good question. As a general rule, I don't add anything to my lures, okay, as far as scents are concerned. All of the DOA products are scented. The product is within the plastic, so it's not something that washes off. It's,
You can use those again and again and again.
yes. Now, I brought this up here for a reason, okay? There's a lot of people that really like this product, and there's a lot of different products out here that are scents, that are natural, okay? I'm not going to say this doesn't work, but what I will say is this. I don't think that this is either like the number one determining factor that a fish is going to make. Now, I guarantee you, if a fish is blind, the other senses are going to get better and improve. But here's where I'm going to tell you, if you're fishing in water that is so murky and so messed up that a fish now starts to rely on his other senses, redfish are terrific scent feeders, okay? When you have water that's less than clear, and believe me, if you've done any scuba diving or any kind of snorkeling or anything like that up for scallops or whatever, you want to go on a day when you've got good visibility. But fish don't have that opportunity all the time. Sometimes they will be in a situation where they'll be bumping into stuff that far away. If it weren't for their own sonar that's bouncing stuff off of things, that they'd have a hard time navigating. But I will say, products like the Berkeley Gulp that are extremely scented, that's not a lure that I want to move very fast, because suddenly if a fish is relying on its sense of scent to find that bait, it's not going to happen just like that. They're going to have to get it where the current has maybe brought that scent to them. Okay, so this is where fishing dead bait, if you have experience fishing dead bait or dead sticking a bait, you're going to be real successful with that. Greg and Brian Watts, two of the best red fishermen I know and good friends of mine, love fishing Berkeley Gulp. But you know something? I've seen them in my backyard fishing tournaments, and I don't want to get near them because I know what they were doing there. They would take Berkeley Gulp, and it didn't really matter if it was the shrimp body, if it was a bait fish body, whatever. They'd throw it out, and they let it sit on the bottom. They're not moving the bait. Yes? Okay. And so basically bottom line is that fish, they know, is relying on the scent alone to do its thing and attract the fish. So that is not my first thing. My first thing is I will catch more fish than the next guy because I'm going to make twice as many casts as you are, or 3 times as many casts as you are, because I'm going to go boom, 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 boom. I'm going to cover this whole area. I'm going to fan cast an area, and I'm going to stick it by a fish's nose. You and I have hands. When we go to the grocery store, we can pick something up, look at it, maybe sniff it, put it down if we don't like it. Fish doesn't have that opportunity. They don't have hands. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring my case to the fish. I'm going to bring it by as many noses as I can, and their hands are their mouths. They're going to reach out and they're going to grab it, and if they don't like what it tastes like or what it smells like or feels like, they're going to spit it out if they can get around the hook. I'm going to rely on my instincts to set the hook when I feel that to catch the fish. So that's where I'm going to maybe end up catching more fish. But there are so many different baits. But speaking of top, bottom, in between, top order lures, this mirror lure Top Dog is one of the fishiest catching lures that I think I've ever come across. I love top water fishing. I won't catch the most fish on top water, but a lot of times I'll catch the biggest fish on a top water bait. And I don't throw necessarily little baits, but I do throw a lot of big baits. There are lots and lots of favorites, but I'll tell you something. If you like fishing live bait and you fish sardines, whatever you want to call them, pilchards, white bait, not greenbacks, that's not the same thing. But if you fish that kind of bait, you shouldn't go out of the house without some of these miridines. This has been one of the best entries in the market of artificial lures for saltwater fishing. It's a tremendous bait. I've got a gazillion stuff that I just pulled off the shelf because, you know, and people say, well, do you fish for tarpon? Yeah, I fish for tarpon. You want to talk about something really stupid? Yep, you need to change the hooks on this bait. But if you like to bass fish, think of a bass that's 10 or 20 times the normal size coming up and crashing a topwater bait. Put heavier hooks on this big storm chug bug, you'll have a blast. Same thing with that top dog, because I've absolutely had a blast with that. If you like topwater fishing and big trout, baits like this Johnny Rattler, this 5M mirror lure, terrific prop baits, propeller baits. Some people take one prop off, but it changes the attitude of the bait. I don't necessarily do that. Biggest trout I've ever caught was caught on a mirror lure prop bait. It was 15 pounds, not the prop bait, but the fish. And that was after it barfed up a needlefish about 1 foot long and maybe an inch or so in diameter and spewed out about a cup of roe. That fish was real close to world record. It was caught in McGill Bay probably about 12 years ago, 14 years ago, on a 6M mirror lure that they don't make anymore. And bottom line, 6M is a slow sinker, but it had 2 props, just like this 5M. You can take the 5M, take the props off, go down and buy one of the 52s, and then switch it over. You got a slow sinker with the props, and that works. Any real quick questions?
Have you on the gulp, on the crabs,
Mhm.
have you ever used those for, like cobia or snook or tarpon?
Have I ever fished like the gulp crabs for permit cobia, tarpon, that kind of thing? Yes, I have. How
did it work?
It works. I use, actually, Mark Nichols has a crab, and gosh, ask me later, I'll tell you the other brand. Riptide, Culprit Riptide, make 2 or 3 sizes of crab that I put my own, like a jig head in there and rig them up. But they do work. Yeah, it takes a little finesse doing, but they do work. Any more questions?
Thank you, Ray.
See, that was a fast 45 minutes. Thank you.